Tonight's going to be unique for many of you because many of you haven't been here on an Ash Wednesday before. So it is going to be unique. I want to explain it to you so that when you leave here with ashes on your forehead, and some of you are going right now, he's not putting ashes on my forehead. I am. I'm going to do that. I'm going to do that. But I do want to. I think that you will appreciate it. How many of you have ever seen someone with like a black ashy cross on their forehead before? Yeah. So we're going to talk a little bit about that tonight. So one of my favorite 80s movies of all time, and I am an 80s kid. It's funny, I'm kind of in the middle of the 80s and the 90s. I was born in 76. And so the way you figure out what kind of kid you are is what culture most influences your life. Well, I landed in the 80s. I remember the 80s very distinctly. I remember jelly bracelets and jelly shoes and parachute pants. I remember it very distinctly. And I remember 80s music. But I also grew up in the 90s. I remember where I was. I just moved to Hazel Green, Alabama. And I thought I was going to have to listen to country music for the rest of my life just to have any friends. I was like, this is terrible. I want to have friends and not have to listen to country music. So I began to listen to country music, and it was okay. It was growing on me. It was the year of Garth Brooks, so it was at least a little bit fun. And what happened was I remember meeting my very first friend. I'm in 10th grade. The year was 1992, and I said, "Hey, man, we're sitting in his redneck truck." And I knew he was a redneck. And I said to him, do you listen to country music? And he says, no, not really. I've really been listening to this new band called Nirvana. And I went, who is this? Who is this Nirvana you speak of? And he turned on the album Nevermind, and I lost my mind. And from then on, I was also a 90s kid. So anyway, one of my favorite 80s movies of all time. I have several favorite 80s movies. How many of you watch 80s movies at all? Have y'all ever watched any cool 80s movies? Right. So one of my favorite 80s movies of all times. And if my TV if I'm just ever scrolling, which I rarely do anymore, but if I'm ever scrolling on the TV and I see these two words on the screen, my television immediately stops on the channel and I have to finish the movie. It's kind of like Krispy Kreme. If I'm driving by Krispy Kreme, my car just automatically just starts veering into the parking lot. There's nothing I can do about it. I have no control. I just go there and I can't help it. Out of my mouth comes, I would like a dozen hot glazed. I can't help it. I have no control, and my television does the same thing whenever I see these two words, Karate Kid. So in the movie Karate Kid, you guys know the movie? In the movie The Karate Kid, one of my favorite parts of the whole movie definitely is the end of the movie where he's fighting and he's going to win, and we all know what's going to happen. He's going to win. I still love the part. Do y'all hear it? Some of my favorite parts of the Karate Kid is when he's fighting and the background noises, kind of the ad-lib noises. Do you remember this noise? Yeah, Johnny, put him in a body bag. Y'all remember that? I think that's my favorite line in the whole movie. It's like background. You're the best around is playing. Y'all remember that? You're the best around. Yeah, Johnny, put him in a body bag. So that's in the back. That's my favorite line in the whole movie. But my next favorite part of the whole movie is Mr. Miyagi. If you remember, Karate Kid, Daniel's son, gets beat up, and he goes to Mr. Miyagi and he says, "Hey, teach me karate," and which is how you say it. Everybody knows that. So he says, "Teach me karate," and Mr. Miyagi's like, no. And he's like, "You have to teach me karate, Mr. Miyagi." And he's like, no. And then he gets beat up, and Mr. Miyagi says, "Okay, I'll teach you." And so he says, "Come over tomorrow and be ready to work hard." So he gets over the next morning like 6 o'clock, and Mr. Miyagi says, "Okay, we're going to start learning karate. We're going to start learning karate. Sand the deck." And so Daniel's son learns how to sand the deck, right? And then he says, "Come back tomorrow." And he's like, "All right, that was kind of a weird day, but I guess I'm earning my keep." He comes back the next day and he's like, "Hey, I want you to wax the cars." He's like, "I thought I was learning karate." He says, "Oh, you are." And so he's waxing the cars. And then he says, "Come back tomorrow." And Daniel's son comes back the next day and his arms are sore, and he says, "All right, today I want you to paint the fence." He's like, "What? Paint the fence?" So he's out there painting the fence, and Mr. Miyagi, about halfway through the day, he comes out and he says, No, paint the fence. Ha, 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 you paint the fence. Ha, ha. And he's like that. And I feel like that was racist, but whatever. So then he says to him, no big deal, we're just a church. So, and then he says, he says, "Come back the next day." And at this point, Daniel's son's getting really flustered. He's getting frustrated about what's happening. And so he comes back the next day, and there's just a note on the door. Like if Mr. Miyagi's not even there, it says, gone fishing, paint the house. And so Daniel's son is so mad. He's just so mad. Mr. Miyagi finally gets home, and he's just painting his, no. He says, no. You don't paint the house like that. You paint the house like this. So he does all of that. And finally, at the end of the day, Daniel's son is so upset. And Mr. Miyagi's there. And he says, all you got me doing, you just got me out here doing your yard work for free. I wanted to learn karate. I got beat up, and I just wanted to learn something, Mr. Miyagi. And he says, I'm not doing any more of your crap. I don't think he says crap, but he's like, I'm not doing any more of this. And Mr. Miyagi says, wait. He says, wait, Daniel's son. And he says, wait. And Daniel says, what? And he says, show me sand the deck. And he says, no, I'm not doing it anymore. And he says, show me sand the deck. So he gets down and he starts sanding. He goes, no, right here. He's like, wax off, sand on. And he goes, no, show me that. And then he just starts all of a sudden. You remember this part, right? It's amazing. All of a sudden, he goes, wah! And Daniel's son goes, wah! And then he goes, show me paint the fence. And then all of a sudden, just out of nowhere, this is what happens. He just starts just flailing at Daniel's son. He's like, ga. And Daniel's like, and he's doing wax things and paint things and sand things. And like his reflexes just automatically are just like, and and like every move. I love how I'm looking around the room and some of you are doing that with me. Like just in your heart, I see some of you going. But in his heart, it's like this muscle memory had taken place, and he had these new reflexes that were just automatically there. And he was able to stop Mr. Miyagi, and he had learned karate. I probably should say it like this. He had learned karate. And what Ash Wednesday does for us is it continues to build this reflex on the inside of us that points us toward Jesus. And so I want to do a little teaching tonight, and then I want to do a little preaching tonight, and then and then we'll close out. And I'm going to go tonight, as soon as we're finished, I'm going to go to Taco Bell in Helena, and I'd love to be with all of you. I'd love to hang out with all of you. But before we get there, I want to tell you a little bit about what Ash Wednesday is. But before I get there, I want to tell you the way that the calendar, what we call the church calendar or the liturgical calendar. Anybody ever heard that before? Anybody ever heard those terms, the church calendar? Okay, so not many of us. So what the liturgical calendar is, will you throw that up, Bethany? So this is it, and I know it doesn't make any sense to you, but what I'd like for you to do is I want you to think about this outside circle here as the calendar year. And so around 1700 years ago, all of these pieces were put together. And if you're looking, I wish I had one of those little laser pointer things because I feel like I'm teaching. Well, what happened was, is somebody getting one out? Okay, thank you, Jacob. So here's what I'd like for you to do. So the church calendar, what it is it takes 6 months out of the year, and it focuses on Jesus every single year. And the church calendar or the liturgical calendar starts with what we call Advent. Advent is the very first Sunday after Thanksgiving every single year. So it's the first Sunday. And what we're doing is this story is supposed to take us through the life of Jesus. And so we have different seasons, and we focus a little bit different on a few different things on each season of Jesus' life. So this first season, Advent, what Advent is about is before Jesus ever even shows up. It's extremely hard for us to understand what it was like to be a Jewish person in the time of where Jesus came on the scene. And the reason is because the Israelites were slaves, and none of us have ever been a slave before. And so what happened was they had been a slave for hundreds and hundreds of years. And so what Advent is about is it's this season where we remember the time where the Israelites were waiting on a Savior. They were waiting on someone that would come and free them. They were waiting on someone that would come and fight against the oppressor and set them free. And that's what Advent is about. It's a season where we consider in our own life those times that we wait. where we wait on God to do something, where we ask God, God, are you ever going to do this? Are you ever going to answer this prayer? Are you ever going to come through for me? That's what Advent is about. How many of you have ever had a season in your life where you were waiting on God to you were praying and you prayed for weeks, and then that turned into months and months, and for some of you, it might have even turned into a year or more. And you were just waiting on God, and there were moments where you were like, God, are you even there? How many of you ever had those moments before? Yeah, a lot of us have. So that's what Advent is about. The next one is what we call Christmas. You might have heard that before, but Christmas, it lasts for 12 days. In fact, you've probably heard the song. It goes a little something like this, the 12 days of Christmas, like on the first day of. So Christmas is a 12-day season, and guess what we're celebrating in that time? We're remembering the birth of Jesus. The next season that we have there is called Epiphany. Epiphany is where we remember, this is the focus on Jesus' teachings and his miracles. So that's what that season is about. And then we get to Lent. Now, here's what I want you to notice. I'm going to finish talking to you. But Ash Wednesday is the beginning of Lent. So it goes right there in that little, right where 12 o'clock would be. Do you see that? And we're going to talk about Ash Wednesday in just a second. But Lent is 40 days long. It's actually 47, but you don't count the Sundays. But it's 40 days long, and it reminds us of Jesus' testing and temptation. And we go back to other times in Scripture where we see 40 days of something happening. So like or 40 years, for instance, the Israelites moved around the desert for 40 years. Noah was on the ark, and it rained for 40 days. So we see this theme in Scripture several different places. So that's what Lent is about. Easter is what we have between Lent and Easter is what's called the Passion Week. That's the last week of Jesus' life. Easter is the day that he raises from the dead. And then 50 days after that is what we call Pentecost. And Pentecost is it is when the New Testament church, the first Christian church, the Jesus church, it's called the Way. It's when they received the Holy Spirit, baptized in the Holy Spirit. So that's 6 months of the year. It always takes 6 months. And so the other 6 months is what's called ordinary time. I know I'm giving you a lot, but here's what I want you to see. The first 6 months up there is what we call the story of Jesus, and the second 6 months is what we call the story of the people of God. So we spend 6 months with Jesus, and we spend 6 months with all of the other stuff in Scripture. And what it does is it builds this rhythm or this reflex in our life that centers us on the work activity of God and what he's constantly doing. And so for years now, I've tried to follow this in my own devotional life. And I'm going to go ahead and tell you this. I want to invite you, for those of you who want to do this, Edge, I've already invited you in our Slack channel. Some of you leaders, I've already invited you. But I'm going to do a Lent devotional, which I've done for several years now, in the Bible app. And if you want to do that devotion with me over the next 40 days, 47, over the next 40 days, just shoot me a text. And I'll send you an invitation, and you can do the devotional with me. I don't know if you guys do the devotionals on the Bible app, but it's very cool what it can do. Because what it'll do is, if you tell it to, it'll give you a reminder. How many of you have ever meant to do a devotion time with Jesus, and you just forget, and the next day you're like, oh, I meant to do that. And then you forget it, and you're like, oh, I meant to do that. How many of you have ever done that before? So what the Bible app will do is it'll just send you a reminder every day at whatever time you tell it to. So it might send it to you at 7 o'clock in the morning, or it might send it to you at 9 o'clock at night as you're getting into bed. And it'll just remind you, hey, don't forget to do the Lent devotion with Jeremy. So just shoot me a text if you want to, and I'll send you an invite for that. So here's what Ash Wednesday's about. Just a few more minutes. I want to talk to you about what Ash Wednesday's about. In Genesis chapter 3, verse 16, it says this. So if you remember what's happened in Genesis chapter 3, is that Adam and Eve have sinned. They have eaten this apple or whatever fruit it was. Tradition tells us, anybody want to take a stab at what you think it was? It was a quince. Jeopardy question. Pray for Alex Trebek. So they have eaten the apple, and they have sinned, and now they are aware of their own mortality, and they are aware of their own sinfulness. In fact, Genesis tells us that in Genesis 2:25, it says that they were naked and they felt no shame. That's going to be awesome, right? So they were naked and they felt no shame. And then in Genesis 3, all of a sudden, they noticed that they're naked. And when God comes to them, he says, who told you that this was wrong? Where did you find out that there was something wrong with this? Because this brokenness has immediately entered all of humanity. So Genesis chapter 3, God is, what he's doing is he is telling them what the curse of sin would bring. And what we need to understand is this isn't God cursing them. This isn't God saying, because you did this, that I'm going to throw this lightning bolt at you and hurt you. What God is saying is because sin has entered the world, these are the things that are going to happen to you. And so he says, Genesis chapter 3, verse 16 says, to the woman he said, I will make your pains in childbearing very severe. So anybody that has ever had a baby, I only see, I think, a couple in here tonight, but most of you ladies will have a baby. You get to blame Eve for it hurting. So when you're just trying to push and you're like, you can just scream, Eve! So you're welcome. I will make your pains in childbearing very severe. With painful labor, you will give birth to your children. Listen to this. This is what sin brings. Your desire will be for your husband, and he will rule over you. I want you to hear this very closely. The curse of sin causes us to rule over one another. This desire to lord over someone or to rule over someone. This idea that the husband is the head of the household is actually part of the curse. That's not what God intended. God intended a beautiful collaboration and partnership between a husband and a wife to go about and do what he's called them to do. And so if your parents ever say to you, well, we need to listen to Dad. Dad's the head of the household. Say, yes, sir. But it is part of the curse. All right, verse 17. If you say to mom, if you say to your dad, Pastor Jeremy said this is the curse, I'm doing what I dang well please, and I get a phone call, I'm going to deny it. I'm not going to deny it. I'm going to say, yes, that's true. And then I'm there, y'all are going to leave the church, and then you're going to have to go to some boring church. All right, verse 17. To Adam, he said, because you listened to your wife and you ate the fruit from the tree about which I commanded you that you're not supposed to eat from, cursed is the ground because of you. Through painful toil, you'll eat food from it all the days of your life. So he says it's going to be hard work for you to be able to eat. You used to have any pick in the whole garden you wanted, and you just walked over to it, and it was there for you. Now it's going to be painful. It's going to be hard work for you to have. You're going to work hard, and it's going to feel like work. Any of you that have ever worked before and you didn't enjoy it, that's the curse. It will produce thorns and thistles for you, and you will eat the plants of the field. By the sweat of your brow you will eat your food until you return to the ground. Since from it you were taken, for dust you are, and to dust you will return. In a few minutes, I'm going to put some ashes on your forehead in the shape of the cross, and I'm going to say to you, from dust you have come, and to dust you will return. And what I want you to understand what's going on there is several different things. What we're doing is we're remembering what Jesus has done for us, but we first, in order to remember how miraculous what Jesus has done for us, we have to realize, what is he curing? What is he fixing? What is he resolving? Sin in our world has caused our world to go absolutely insane. Our world is broken. Our country is broken. Our state is broken. Our cities are broken. The schools that you go to are broken. I've told you this before, and I'll continue to say this to you. In our world today, 25,000 kids died because they starved to death. 25,000 kids today died because they starved to death. 25,000. And tomorrow, 25,000 kids are going to die because they starved to death. And the day after that, and the day after that, and the day after that. And it will not end. Our world is broken, and here's what's so stupid about it. Our country, America, spends, you ready for this? 30 times more on building weapons than it would take to feed every one of them. So we could heal them, we could feed them, but instead we choose to kill. Our world's broken because we choose to kill instead of to heal. And so what rubbing ashes on our forehead is telling us is that because of the curse of sin, every one of us are going to return to the ground. We are going to die one day. You're going to die one day. And I'm going to die one day. And it's going to be a sad time for every one of us around. For every one of us. Because our world is broken. People are dying every single day. For reasons that they shouldn't have to die. You and I are going to die. And there's nothing we can do about it. And so we rub ashes on our head to say, hey, live your life, it matters. Do things that matter. Do things that heal instead of kill. But what's cool about it is when we rub these ashes that remind us that we're going to die one day, is we put the ashes in the shape of a cross. Because what the cross does is it reminds us that even though you and I are going to die, death does not have the final word. Death is not the end game. Death is not the last word. Death isn't how this whole thing ends up. You and I don't die and then we are just gone forever and there is no eternity. But instead, because of what Jesus has done, He has defeated death. Death doesn't get the final word. Jesus has taken the final word. And so what we do is we put the ashes on there to remind us, you and I are going to die. Let this moment matter. Yet death doesn't have the final word. And that's what Ash Wednesday is about. It's a reminder that today, you and I are on our way to death. But when we do die, Jesus has had the final word. And we will live for eternity with Him. You guys know I wrote down in my notes that I was going to talk about my grandfather passing away and how painful it was. But since my girls are on a track meet today, 6 months ago, Tiff, those of you that don't know Tiff, some of y'all haven't even been with me just in the last 6 months. Tiff was my wife who I was married to for 20 years. And she died 6 months ago. And can I tell you, the last 6 months have been the hardest ever in my life. I've never experienced anything harder than the last 6 months. It's been miserable because that's what death does. Death is painful and it hurts and it brings sadness and grief. But what we get to realize today is that that's not the end. That's not the end of it. It's not over. And so today, here's what I'm going to ask you to do as I put ashes on your forehead. I'm just going to ask you to remember two things. I'm going to say to you, from dust you've come, and to dust you will return. And all I want you to do is think about two things. One day I'm going to die. Today has to matter. But even though I will die, it will not be the end of my life. My life will go on for eternity. And what I do in this life with the time that I have has immeasurable echoes throughout all of eternity. How am I living it? How do I want to live it? And how am I going to live it? So, that's Ash Wednesday. I do want to remind you, if you want to do that Lent devotion, Ash Wednesday starts Lent. If you want to do that Lent devotion with me, shoot me a text and we'll just do it together. And it'll give us 40 days to just kind of think through Jesus' life together. And I think it'll be good for us. So here's what I want to do tonight. I know that this is new for many of you, but I do want to ask you. You certainly do not have to participate if you don't want to. But I will tell you, in the several years that I've done this, I've only had a couple people not do it. We just put ashes. If you're like, I feel dumb, I don't want to do this, then go to the bathroom and wash it off. But I'm going to wear mine to Taco Bell, so you won't be the only one that wears yours to Taco Bell. Okay, I'll have mine on until I go take a shower tonight. So it'll be there. And you won't be the only people. There'll be a few people that are like, what in the world are those people doing? But there's a lot more people that understand what's going on than you think. So tonight, if you'll do this for me, here's what I'm going to ask. I actually asked Hannah to help me because Amber's gone with MC. So I asked Hannah to help me. So Hannah's going to come over here, and she's going to do this side. So here's what I'd like for you to do. If you will just line up, all of you. If you'll just line up over there on that way, and Hannah's going to say to you, from dust you've come, into dust you will return. And then this crew, if y'all will line up on this wall and y'all come to me, and then we just kind of go down the middle and sit back down. If everybody, here's what I'm going to ask you to do. Daniel's going to put on some music for us. Here's what I'd like for you to do. Keep it still sacred, and let's keep a good attitude in here. Don't get talking. Instead, I'd like for you just to sit down and just think through what's just happened. So no talking, and then I'll pray and dismiss. It'll take us maybe 5 minutes, 10 minutes at the most, and then I'll pray and we'll get out of here, okay? All right? Go ahead, Daniel. Thanks.